All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and do our gas exchange note cycle. So the first thing we need to do is complete this Edpuzzle. You're going to fill out your notes. All right. So let's start off by talking about a scenario, right? We've been talking about humans, but dogs are going to do gas exchange and cell respiration just like us, right? So if greyhounds are running a race, they start to breathe faster, their heart rate increases. Let's talk about why. All right, so we know that cell respiration is a process conducted by all organisms, and they do this in order to make energy for all life processes. So we are going to write under ATP and arrow energy for all life processes. We constantly need ATP to stay alive, whether we're exercising or not, we need to make ATP, right? Another fact that we know is that during exercise, we need more oxygen because we need to make more ATP. Right, so I'm just going to have you highlight whatever is underlined. All right, so how does the body get oxygen? Right, the body gets oxygen through the respiratory system. And the respiratory system only consists of the lungs, basically, right? And so the lungs in the respiratory system, they allow us to breathe in oxygen. When the oxygen comes in through the mouth, that oxygen will travel to the bottom of the lungs into these branches called alveoli. Right? So if we kind of look, we see all these little branches. I kind of think of them as like a little tree. And you can almost think of the alveoli as little leaves on the tree, right? And if you zoom in to one of these little leaves, you'll see something called the alveoli, right? That's the alveoli right there. So we're going to go ahead and label that. Notice that you have a lot of alveoli, right? You don't only have one. All those little tiny leaf-like things, right? Those are all alveoli. Okay, so when you breathe in, that oxygen is going to travel all the way to all those alveoli. So connected to the alveoli is the circulatory system, right? So the circulatory system consists of blood vessels, aka the arteries and the heart, the veins and the arteries and the heart. And the circulatory system is connected to the respiratory system at the alveoli. So they're not the same system, but they're very closely connected, right? So if we actually look at that, we're going to see that here's the alveoli, right? And then we actually see that the vessels are actually wrapped all the way around. I like to think of it as veins, like around a tree or around a building. They kind of wrap all the way around it, right? And so this is actually how blood is brought to the lungs to pick up oxygen and drop off carbon dioxide. So we're going to zoom in. Okay, we're going to zoom into this alveoli right here, and we're going to get even closer. Okay, this is on the cellular level. All right, gas exchange occurs between the circulatory system and the respiratory system at the alveoli when oxygen diffuses from the alveoli to the red blood cells in the capillary and carbon dioxide diffuses from the red blood cell to the alveoli to be breathed out, right? So we're going to write here that we're going to put a little bullet. We're going to write gas exchange in the lungs, right? So notice that you have your capillary right here, your alveoli right here, so that oxygen is going to essentially, if you look, see where it says air in, that oxygen is going to travel in here and it's going to diffuse from the alveoli into the red blood cells. And at the same time, the carbon dioxide is going to diffuse from the red blood cells into the alveoli, and that will leave. That's kind of why we call it gas exchange, right? You're kind of actually swapping those gases at the alveoli. So what happens to the oxygen next? Next, the oxygen is going to travel on a red blood cell. I like to think of the red blood cells as that little bus, almost like they have like an oxygen backpack. So the oxygen is going to hop onto that red blood cell. It's going to travel through the bloodstream, right? And remember that the blood is part of the circulatory system. The circulatory system, what is the purpose? The purpose is for transport. I like to think of it as the roads all around our body because it allows for oxygen, food, and nutrients to move all the way through our body, right? We're just talking about oxygen right now, but just understand that blood also carries water, food, nutrients, all to all the cells in the body, right? The heart is going to pump that blood to keep it moving, to keep those red blood cells moving, because every single cell in the body needs oxygen and they need nutrients too. Every single one of our trillions of cells need oxygen because they need to do cell respiration, right? So I put a picture here just showing you, a picture of the heart and one of the veins and what that might look like, right? And on the red blood cell, we actually can see this is what oxygen actually is going to look like when it's actually bonded to that red blood cell. All right, we're going to talk about when a red blood cell gets to a body cell. So when a red blood cell gets to a body cell, okay, and if we want to see right here, here's those body cells. They surround, right? This is going to be a blood vessel. Remember that these are our red blood cells. That's important to know what the picture's talking about, right? So here's our red blood cell. And we're noticing that when the red blood cells get to our body cells, they're going to allow that oxygen to diffuse from the red blood cell into the cells, and carbon dioxide will diffuse from the body cells into the red blood cell. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of label that, even though this is kind of already labeled, I'm just going to write it again. I think that when you write it, your brain kind of does a better job at understanding what's going on, right? And this happens for every cell in the body. So let's go even further. Let's go into that body cell, right? To talk about cell respiration. So this is a nice little picture again of the red blood cell dropping off oxygen. It's kind of hard to see. So I'm going to label that dropping off oxygen to our cells. Our cells are going to take that oxygen in to their mitochondria, right? So this is a body cell right here. And notice that that mitochondria is inside, right? So it's going to take in that oxygen. It's going to make CO2, right? And then it's going to give that CO2, right? Here's our body cell. It's going to give it to those red blood cells to take to the lungs to be breathed out. So remember that we make the CO2 in our cells. We can't breathe in CO2. Our cells actually make it through cell respiration. Right? And let's go all the way back through. It's kind of like the same process as oxygen, right? If we see, I like this little cartoon showing that we have our red blood cells carrying oxygen to our cells, right? So it's carrying that oxygen to our cells, and that our cells are giving up CO2, and those red blood cells are going to take those back to the heart, back to the lungs to be breathed out. So we're just going to see we've seen this before. This is the alveoli, right? So that's the alveoli. We're seeing these red blood cells. They're delivering carbon dioxide so that that carbon dioxide can be breathed out. Okay. Last but not least, let's talk about an important thing called homeostasis, which is a word you've probably heard before. Okay, but let's just make sure we understand what it's talking about, right? Homeostasis is basically the body trying to maintain a stable internal environment. We want to keep our oxygen levels at a certain point, and we want to keep our carbon dioxide levels at a certain point, right? We want to keep them at a certain level so that we stay healthy. Okay, so I'm going to also highlight stable internal environment. So essentially the brain and the nervous system is always checking what's my oxygen, what's my carbon dioxide level, right? And when you exercise, all of a sudden those carbon dioxide levels in the blood increase, right? Because you're doing more cell respiration. And this tells the brain and the nervous system, oh, I need these lungs and this heart to move quicker. So the first thing the brain's going to do is it's going to tell the lungs to breathe faster. And the purpose of this is to bring more oxygen into the body and to get that carbon dioxide out of the body so we can bring that carbon dioxide level back to normal. The nervous system also tells the heart to beat faster. And this is so that oxygen can be delivered to all your cells quicker, right? So, speed up the lungs to breathe in oxygen, speed up the heart to pump that blood faster so more oxygen can get delivered quickly and more carbon dioxide can get delivered to your lungs to be breathed out, right? All right, that is the end. You are now going to do the cell respiration and gas exchange questions. Just to let you know, they need to be full sentences. They should be specific. They should not be quick one-word answers. If you need a line sheet of paper to answer them because you like kind of having that structure, that is totally fine. If you have any questions, let us know.